Hi guys, Deanne here from Canada Abroad, and thanks so much for tuning in. Today we're going to be talking about the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program. Now, it used to be known as the Alberta Immigrant Nominee Program, but it has recently been renamed as of February 16th. And with that renaming, they renamed 3 of their existing programs, and then they also added 2 extra programs. So we will be going over all of those changes in this video. Now, with Alberta, they do have one program that does not require a job offer. And then there are some that require job offers. And then they also have some programs for people who want to start a business or purchase an existing business in Alberta. So the first one of the streams that we are going to go through is the one for people who don't have a job offer, because it's obviously the most popular one right now. So with this specific program, it does require that you have a valid express entry profile. So you would have to be able to get into the express entry system first to qualify. And this program is called the Alberta Express Entry Stream. So the first thing that you would have to do is you would have to enter your express entry profile. So a valid profile where you were found eligible. And on that profile, there is one section that asks you about which provinces you are interested in living in. As long as you either tick all provinces or you tick off Alberta specifically, that's all you have to do in order to be considered by this program. There's no secondary step where you have to go to the Alberta website and do an expression of interest. For this stream, all you have to do is tick that box. Then what happens is when Alberta is selecting people, they look at what their economy needs and which occupation codes they want at the time, and then they will reach out to those profiles that they're interested in, and they would give you what's called a notification of interest. This would basically say, we're interested in your profile. You have a certain amount of days to get back to us, and then we will ask you to complete certain application forms, send them certain supporting documents to prove everything on your express entry profile, and then they will review your application. If everything was in order, they would approve it, and they would then add the provincial nomination to your express entry profile. Once you accept that, it adds 600 points to your comprehensive ranking system score, and it then deems you eligible under the provincial nominee programs, so that when the express entry draws are happening and they are selecting provincial nominees, you would then be eligible to be selected and receive an invitation to apply. Now, with this specific stream, there are a few things that would benefit your profile and a few things that would go against your profile being selected. So the things that might increase your chance of being selected with this program, you have a job offer in Alberta, so it's not mandatory, but can increase your likelihood of being selected. You've graduated from a Canadian post-secondary institution. You have a parent, a child, a brother, a sister who is a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident living in Alberta. Or French is your first language. And that's one of the newer things that they've actually added here. So French is now being given a lot of preference in different provinces outside of Quebec. And then the following factors can count against your profile in terms of being selected. Now, if your express entry profile is going to expire in 5 months or less, that can count against you. If the primary occupation code that you've used on your express entry profile falls into one of the occupation codes that they are currently not selecting or will not select, then that obviously would count against you. And if you want to see that specific list of what will not be selected, you can just click in the link above and it'll take you through to that. Now, the next stream that we're going to be talking about is the Alberta Express Entry Accelerated Tech Pathway. So what this is, it's for people who are already in the express entry system, okay? And you would have, in your profile when you created it, ticked off that you were interested either in all provinces or Alberta. That's the first step. But for this specific pathway, you have to actually have a qualifying job offer in a certain tech-related occupation code. So this stream, even though it's linked to Express Entry, does require a job offer for you to be eligible. Now, your comprehensive ranking system score has to be at least 300 points or higher. The job offer that you have has to be full-time indeterminate, so at least 30 hours a week and no set end date. And it has to create an employer-employee relationship. So you couldn't be an independent contractor or anything like that. You actually have to become an employee of the company. Your occupation has to be on the list of qualifying occupations. So if you want to see that list, you can just click the link above and it'll take you through to see which occupation codes are eligible. The primary occupation code that you've listed on your Express Entry profile has to match the occupation code of the job that you're being offered. So you want to go in and make sure that those are a match. And with the job that you're being offered, the wage that they're offering has to be in line with the average wage in Alberta for that occupation code that you're being offered. So they couldn't be paying you way below what the average Canadian is earning for that position. Now, if you meet the criteria of this program, you go to the Alberta website. So this one does require a secondary step after you have done your Express Entry profile. You would go to the Alberta Immigrant Nominee Program website, and there's a form that you will complete. You fill in the details, and then if they are interested in your profile, then they will reach out to you with a notification of interest. So it's not a guarantee that everyone who meets the criteria and fills out a form will be selected, because they obviously only have so many nominations for the specific stream that they might not be able to pick everybody who qualifies. So also just keep that in mind. The next program or stream that we're going to look at is the Alberta Opportunity Stream. Now, with this specific program, you don't have to have an Express Entry profile, but you do have to have a qualifying job offer. So again, if you don't have a job offer, then this stream will not be an option for you. The job offer that you have, it has to be full-time paid indeterminate position. So at least 30 hours a week with no end date. It has to create an employer-employee relationship. So, you couldn't be an independent contractor. You have to already have a valid work permit and be working on that work permit at the time of your application. If you're gonna apply through this stream, you have to have a minimum of a high school education. If you completed your high school outside of Canada, you would have to get an educational credential assessment done to prove that you have the equivalent of a high school diploma. You have to write an approved English or French test and get a certain score depending on your occupation code. So if you're in an O, A, or B position, you have to get a minimum of a CLB level 5. And then below those levels, so or C or D, you need a CLB level 4. But if you are applying under NOC code 3413, you do need to get a level 7. In terms of the work experience that you have, there's two different eligibilities here. So the first one is that you have to have 12 months of Canadian work experience in the occupation that your job offer is in. And that work experience has to have occurred in the 18 months preceding the date of your application. The other option is that you have to have at least the equivalent of 24 months of full-time paid work experience in the job that you're being offered. And that could be a combination of work experience inside Canada and outside of Canada. But that 24 months of work experience has to have occurred in the last 30 months. Now, if you're on a postgraduate work permit, then you need at least 6 months of full-time paid work experience in the occupation that you're going to be working in Alberta in the last 18 months. And the work experience or the occupation has to be related to your program of studies. Now, there is a set list of occupations that are not eligible. So if you want to learn about which occupation codes will not be eligible for this program, so even if you have the job offer, if the job offer is in one of these streams, you would not be eligible. Just click the link above. The next program is the farm stream. Now, this used to be called the self-employed farmer stream, but this too was renamed on February 16th. So this is for anybody who wants to start a farm in Alberta or purchase an existing farm in Alberta. So it can't be any business, it's specifically a farm and not a hobby farm. You have to prove that you have farm management skills, so you actually have experience managing a farm or owning a farm. So if you've never done that before, then this would not be the program for you. And you'd have to prove this through documents. It could be financial documents from your current farm or previous farm. You would have to have a proposed business plan for the farm that you plan to purchase or start up. You would have to provide documents to prove your education or your work experience in the field, proof that a Canadian financial institution is willing to fund your proposed farming business. You need to invest a minimum of $500,000 Canadian into the farm, and you have to have a minimum net worth of $500,000 Canadian. So it seems a bit strange that they want your investment to be the exact same amount as your net worth, because let's think about this for a minute. If you only have $500,000 Canadian to your name and you invest all of that into the farm, you're not going to have anything left over for plane tickets, moving costs, living expenses. So that's just something to think about. Even though they have these minimums, you're probably going to want to have a little bit more left over. And you have to be investing in what they call a primary production farming business in Alberta. But they don't actually have a specific list of what this is. So that's going to give them a little bit of discretion depending on the type of farm that you want to open, that they could say yay or nay. So it can't be a hobby farm, but it has to be something that, you're actually producing something that you can sell. And you'd want to do a little bit of investigation depending on where you wanted to buy this farm or open it up, about what is going to do the best, what kind of crop or livestock is going to be the best in terms of what is needed and what you're going to make profit with. The next program is what is called the Graduate Entrepreneur Stream. Now, this used to be called the International Graduate Entrepreneur Immigration Stream. So it's just been renamed as of February 16th. So this is a points-based system. So it's, kind of like express entry in the sense that anybody who wants to go through the stream will have to put forward an expression of interest. You will get a score based on your own specific background and the type of business you want to open, and then they will select those with the highest score. Now, to be eligible for this program, you have to have completed at least 2 years of full-time education, resulting in a degree or a diploma from an eligible educational institution in Alberta specifically, so not another Canadian province. You have to have a valid postgraduate work permit, and it has to be valid at the time that you're submitting your expression of interest. You need to get at least a CLB level 7 on an approved English or a French test, and the results have to be from within the last 2 years at the time that you submit your expression of interest. You must be looking to establish a new business in Alberta, and you have to own at least 34% of the business. Now, in terms of the point system, when they are looking at this, the points that they're going to give you is based on a variety of factors. So this includes your own business management or ownership experience, the economic benefit of your proposed business in Alberta, your total business investment. So with this program, there's actually no minimum amount that you have to invest, but obviously if you invest more, you can get more points. Your language proficiency, so the CLB 7 is the minimum, but if you get a level 8 or 9, you can get extra points for that. Your age, so there is no age limit or cap on age, but depending on your age bracket, you will get more or less points. If you have an accompanying spouse, so common law or married, then they can add points depending on their background as well. And if you have a qualifying relative living in Alberta who is a Canadian citizen or permanent resident, that can also add points to your application. The next program is the Foreign Graduate Entrepreneur Stream. Now, this was previously called the Foreign Graduate Startup Visa Stream. So it was also just part of the renaming on February 16th. So With this startup visa, it's similar to the federal startup in a sense, because you're going to have to approach a certain organization who's going to have to agree to back your company or your proposed company. And they're going to have to give you a certificate or a letter to state that they're going to back you before you would be eligible for this program. So what that means is, for this program specifically, there are only specific approved organizations that you can approach, and you would have to pitch your business to them. And if they like it, they would then issue you a letter, and it's called a letter of recommendation, and you would then use that to apply under this stream. So even if you have a business concept or idea, you can't apply to this stream unless you get that letter of recommendation. The other criteria that you would need to have met is that you need to have a minimum of 6 months of full-time work experience. That can be a combination of actively managing a business or owning a business, or the equivalent of one of those two. You need to have a degree from a post-secondary educational institution outside of Canada that was issued in the last 10 years. And because this degree would have been done outside of Canada, you would have to get an educational credential assessment done to prove this. You would have to complete a business plan that includes financials as well. You need to get a minimum of a CLB level 5 on an approved English or French test. You have to be establishing a new business or purchasing an existing business, and you have to own at least 34% of the business. Depending on where you're going to be opening the business, if it's in an urban area, you have to invest at least $100,000 of your own money. And if it's outside of an urban area, you have to invest at least $50,000 Canadian. And then there will be a certain amount of money that you have to have available also to support yourself and your family on your move. And it's very much in line with the low income cutoff for Canada. So it's not too huge of an investment. So just as an example, depending where you're going to be living and opening the business in Alberta, the number varies. But we'll just say for a family of 4 in a highly populated area, you would have to show the equivalent of just over $24,000 Canadian. So it's not a huge amount, given the fact that you're going to have to already invest at least $50,000 to $100,000 Canadian in your business. You'll also have to have this money set aside for your living expenses to get settled in Canada. Up next is one of the 2 new immigration streams that Alberta has introduced. And this program is called the Renewal stream. Now, with this stream, they've said it's a 2-part process. So the first part is done by the community who wants to nominate somebody, and the second part is going to be done by the applicant themselves. So as a first part, the community is going to have to get designated, and they're going to have to be able to provide an endorsement letter to the candidate. The candidate, once they've received that endorsement letter, they can then go ahead and apply to Alberta through this stream. Now, this program is only for rural communities that have a population of less than 100,000 people. So if you're hoping to go through this program, but your job offer is from an area that has a population above 100,000, it's not going to work. This is just for the rural communities. So keep that in mind as we're going through the program. The job has to be for a minimum of 12 months. So if it's a 6-month contract, that's not going to do. It has to be at least a 1-year job offer. In terms of the wage, if you were already working in the position on a work permit that required a labor market impact assessment, you have to be earning and be offered the same wage that was on your labor market impact assessment. If you're not on that type of work permit, then what they say is the wage that you're being offered has to be in line with the low wage for your occupation in Alberta. If the position that you're being offered is one that requires licensing in the province, you would have to show that you have that required licensing so that they know you can actually work in that occupation in Alberta. And then with the job offer, if it's an O, A, or B position, there is a list of certain occupations that are not eligible. So even though it might meet all of the other criteria, if it's on the ineligible list, you wouldn't be able to go through this program. And if you want to find out what that ineligible list is, you can just click on the link above and it'll take you through to that list. Now, in terms of the job that you're being offered, you are going to have a certain amount of qualifying work experience related to the position that you can show. So what they've said is you need to have a minimum of 12 months of full-time paid work experience in the last 18 months. So as of the time you're submitting your application. And they actually have a chart. So if your position is an O level position, then you need to have 12 months in an O or A level position. If it's an A level position, then you need to have 12 months in an O, A, or B level position. If you have a B level job offer, then your work experience has to be in O, A, B, or C. And then if you have a C level position, then your work experience has to be in a B, C, or D level. And then if you have a D level job offer, then it has to be a D level and in the actual same occupation code as the one you're being offered. So a little bit different depending on the level of your actual job offer. And then in terms of the language requirements for this program, if your job is in an O, A, or B level position, you have to have a minimum of a level 5 on an approved language test. And then if your position is a C or D level position, you need to have a level 4 on an approved language test. And those test results have to be within the last 2 years at the time that you're submitting your application. In terms of educational requirements, you have to have a minimum of a high school level education or a high school diploma. And unless you actually completed your high school education in Canada, you would have to obtain an educational credential assessment to prove that you have the equivalent of a high school diploma or higher. The next requirement is in terms of settlement funds. So there is a settlement funds requirement for this program, and the amount of money that you need actually depends on the community that you're going to be living in. So they do have a chart, and if you click the details below, we'll have the link for that chart for you. So it'll list how many family members you have, and then it'll be population size. So depending on if it's a smaller community or a larger community, you need a different amount of money to show as your family settlement fund. So just to give you an example, let's say you're a family of 4, and the community that you're going to be staying in is less than 1,000 people. You have to have the equivalent of $16,579. If the community is between 30,000 and 90, well, just under 100,000, you have to have the equivalent of $20,613 Canadian. So obviously the cost of living is a little bit different from community to community. So this is why they are requiring that as well. Now, if you're like, well, what about communities with more than 100,000 people? Well, those communities wouldn't fit into the rural communities. So you have to remember this program is for the rural parts of Alberta. So it is smaller population sizes. So that is part of what they're looking for as well. The next program that we're going to be looking at is the second of the 2 new immigration programs that Alberta introduced, and this is called the Rural Entrepreneur Stream. So this is for business people, and it's going to be subject just to specific communities. So if you're hoping to open a business in Edmonton or Calgary, this program's not going to be for you. It's to target the smaller communities in Alberta. So the community that you need to be looking at opening or purchasing a business in has to have a population under 100,000 people. Now, because this program was just announced and it's so new, they don't have a list yet of the communities that are participating in this program. But they say that in the next few weeks, they should be posting a list of which communities in Alberta are going to be participating in this program. Because what would happen is you'd have to identify one of the communities of interest to you, and you'd actually have to make contact with them and do an exploratory visit to that community as part of this process. So you can listen to the requirements, but keep in mind that we don't know which communities are going to be involved yet. Once it's announced, then you're actually going to have to go through that list and see which ones might work out for you, and you'll actually have to do a visit to that specific community as part of this process. Now, the basic requirements for this program, the first thing that they want to see is a certain amount of work experience. So they need to see that you have either a minimum of 3 years of experience actively owning or managing a business, or 4 years of experience as a senior manager of a business. And that work experience has to have occurred in the last 10 years. So if it's 11 years ago, you can't count it. It has to all have occurred within the last 10 years. In terms of education, you have to have at least the equivalent of a high school level education. And if you didn't do your high school in Canada, you would have to obtain an educational credential assessment to prove that you have the equivalent of a high school diploma or higher. In terms of the language requirements for this program, you have to have at least a level 4 on an approved English or French test. And those test results have to have been done within the last 2 years as of the date you submit your application. In terms of the net worth requirement, you have to have a minimum of $300,000 Canadian, and that can be in you and your spouse's name if applicable, so it doesn't have to just be in your own name. You have to invest a minimum of $200,000 Canadian into the business. And they did note that those who invest more than $200,000 will be given more points when they're assessing applicants. You have to own at least 51% of the new business. And then if you are going to have a business partner, it would need to be a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident. And then if it's going to be a buyout, then you need to have 100% ownership for the business succession. So it's different there if you're going to be buying the business. If you're creating a new business, then in terms of how many jobs you need to create, you have to create at least one full-time job for a Canadian citizen or permanent resident. And those individuals can't be related to you in any way. If you are taking over and purchasing an existing business, there is no job creation requirement. Now, they've also noted here that if you create more than just the one mandatory job, that again, you can be awarded more points, which would be more beneficial on your application as well. Now, they also state that if you fall within the following factors, it can increase your likelihood to be selected to apply. So anyone who's between the ages of 21 and 49 have a higher chance. If they have a spouse, if that spouse has completed at least a 1-year qualification, and they can also achieve a level 4 on an approved language test, that can increase the applicant's chances. Or if they have a qualifying relative in Alberta. And what they mean by a qualifying relative, it could be a parent, a step-parent, a child, a stepchild, a sibling, a step-sibling, and that can be a relative of either the main applicant or their spouse. In either case, that would qualify. Now, the way that this system works is you would do an expression of interest, and then you would be given a score based on the point system, and then you would have to be invited to apply to the full program. So thank you guys so much, as always, for tuning in. And if you have any questions about any of these programs or you want to learn more, you can just book a consultation with one of our consultants. And thank you guys so much, as always, for tuning in. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date with all the latest Canadian immigration news and updates.